Well, I just want to welcome everyone to the annual Student Leadership Summit of LeadMN. We are college students connecting for change, and I'm Mike Dean, the Executive Director here at LeadMN. So we're joined by the folks obviously in the room, but also we have students joining here virtually. They'll be participating throughout the conference. So we're really excited to have you here, be back to actually in-person events. This summit is actually an annual tradition to bring student leaders from across the state of Minnesota to discuss what we stand for. We represent the roughly 100,000 two-year college students that come from every corner of Minnesota to advocate for opening the doors to opportunity to every person in the state. We believe that everyone should have the opportunity to achieve their dreams. At LeadMN, every student has the potential to be a leader, and that will address tomorrow's challenges. We're one of the oldest and largest dues-paying student associations that's focused exclusively on community and technical college students. If this is your first LeadMN event, please stand up. Quick round of applause. I just want to thank everyone for joining us, for stepping forward to be a leader. While you may not consider yourself a leader right now, we hope that by the end of the year, you will grow into that role. So 50 years ago, a small group of community college students gathered with a radical idea that students could transform higher learning if they used their voice. Community and technical college students, often immigrants, students of color, and low-income students, lacked representation in higher education. Graduation rates had plummeted while tuition rates had soared. Historically overlooked by state and federal policymakers, students struggled to meet their basic needs. Our founders of LeadMN were driven by a fundamental truth, that same truth that drives LeadMN decades later. Students deserve better. What if students had the opportunity to pursue higher learning without having to choose between buying textbooks and paying rent? What if there was a safety net for students living on the razor's edge so that car trouble didn't mean dropping out? What if students had a seat at the table at their institutions in St. Paul, in Washington, D.C., and were empowered to use their voice? Fighting for change wouldn't be easy. It seldom is. Given the intractable challenges they were up against, many students doubted they could actually make a difference. Others already faced an excessive amount of responsibilities outside of the classroom, and the transient nature of students in two-year programs presented unique challenges that came to organizing effectively. And yet, driven by the belief that the status quo was unacceptable, students began to step up and lead. They inspired their peers that change was possible if they came out in force. They organized student groups after student group, campus after campus. What started as a conversation among a small group of friends transformed into a movement of 100,000 students taking Minnesota by storm. You're now part of that movement. Since our founding, LeadMN has provided a platform for community and technical college students to use their voice. We've empowered thousands of leaders with the skills that they need to be successful in work, advocacy, and in life. And we've mobilized hundreds of thousands of students to fight for policy change at the local, state, and national level. And the results have been staggering. In just the few last years, LeadMN has passed the Hunger-Free Campus Act, which recognizes campuses that are working to address food insecurity. We've secured $1.5 million in mental health awareness funding for the state colleges and universities. We've prevented $4 million in tuition hikes, maintaining a tuition freeze for 6 straight years. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in emergency grants and scholarships to make sure students were getting the direct support they needed to be successful. We've registered tens of thousands of students to vote, to have their voice heard, to create policy change. We've passed legislation that created free textbooks across the state that have now saved students $3 million each year. And last year, we helped pass federal legislation securing $28 million in federal aid for students. You may have seen an increase in your bank account in the last few weeks. And so that was money that came directly from the federal stimulus that went to support students across the state. Cool, thanks. Well, LeadMN didn't do this alone. We did this with you. And this happened because student leaders that came before you were frustrated with a status quo that was not working for them and decided to change that. 5 years ago, Sarah walked into the same doors that you walked in today. But her path to that door seemed very unlikely 2 decades ago, when she bounced from one foster home to another throughout her teenage years. Then at 16, she became pregnant and found herself homeless. She dropped out of high school, but decided to take her GED and still pass high school. After that, she enrolled at Rochester Community and Technical College, but unfortunately found the stress of school and baby just too much. So she dropped out of school and gave up her child for adoption. Sarah said, and I quote, "I'd given up. I was feeling that our society is just broken system. I didn't want to be part of it. At that point, I didn't realize that I could change anything. So I just started hitchhiking and traded labor for room and board." Then a few years later, Sarah had a chance meeting in a Walmart parking lot where she was asked to sign a petition. Through that conversation, she realized that she could create positive change through the political process. After that, she started working, doing that very same work of gathering signatures, and actually started up her own company to support various causes. That inspired Sarah to come back to school, where she re-enrolled at RCTC and then joined her student senate. Because of Sarah's life journey, she was attuned to the challenges that her fellow students were facing and how too many of them were struggling with food insecurity. Sarah passed a resolution on her senate to use funds for emergency food aid for students. And then she came through those very doors that you walked through today on a mission to make sure that no student in Minnesota should be food insecure. During the LeadMN General Assembly, Sarah urged student leaders like yourself to address food insecurity in our platform document. That conversation sparked a movement in LeadMN to take on the issue of food insecurity. While Sarah graduated from RCTC and went on to Yale, she inspired Obala to take on that issue. Obala and Sarah grew up very much worlds apart, but shared a passion for helping others. For over a decade, Obala lived in a Kenyan refugee camp after fleeing genocide in his homeland of Gambela, Ethiopia. He and his mother and siblings moved to America in the search of a better education and a better life. That's what brought Obala to Austin, Minnesota, and Riverland Community College. At the start of one semester, Obala remembers withdrawing all his money from his bank account to pay for his textbooks, a total of $1,080. After paying for his books, he was left with only $1.50. From there, Obala went to the cafeteria to get some French fries and chicken nuggets with the change that they had. Unfortunately, to his surprise, the cost of that was $2.50, meaning that he couldn't afford to eat lunch that day. Obala told legislators 2 years ago that, quote, "being food insecure makes me feel bad about myself because it's painful. I feel like I cannot succeed, and that makes me worried about my future. It makes me feel unworthy because I didn't have the energy to do things like my homework. I feel like my teachers won't understand me. It's not that I don't want to do my homework or class assignments, but I can't focus because I'm so hungry. I feel like I'm not a good student. I feel like something is missing from me, and that hurts so bad." Obala's message resonated with legislators, and they passed the Hunger-Free Campus Act, which provides that roadmap for colleges to follow in addressing food insecurity on campus. Since then, colleges have become more aware of this problem. Now 19 colleges have been awarded that designation for taking real steps to combat food insecurity on campus. While we've not yet addressed the issue completely on campus, we are finally getting the resources we need to help students out so they can graduate and achieve their version of the American dream. Sarah and Obala didn't possess some superhuman strength. They just used their power and their voice to elevate the voices of 100,000 students of LeadMN to create change. As we look to the next chapter, who in this room is going to create that change? Whether it's to address the high cost of college, to combat racial injustice that creates barriers for far too many BIPOC students, leading to one of the worst opportunity gaps in the country here in Minnesota, or to combat the fight for student basic needs, to address mental health and food insecurity, or to ensure that every student is empowered to use their voice so that we may elect policymakers that finally put students first. At LeadMN, we believe every student has the potential to be a leader that will help solve tomorrow's challenges, big and small, professional and personal, global and local. Given the right tools, these students have the power to transform Minnesota, higher learning, and the world. The LeadMN movement is here to ensure that they do. To help lead that movement, I want to invite up Axel Kylander, your president, to welcome you to the Student Leadership Summit.
Well, good morning, my dear fellow students. I cannot say how thrilled I am to see all of you here, whether this is your first conference or your 15th or anything in between. So instead of saying that right now, I'm going to dive right into my speech. Welcome to LeadMN. We welcome students of all backgrounds, national origins, ethnicities, communities, identities, and abilities. We value your presence and participation. I know it's not easy these days to do anything, which makes it all the more meaningful that you are here. 3 years ago, I came to the Student Leadership Summit for the first time. I marched in with my fellow and far more experienced student senators and was immediately overwhelmed by all the people. People that went to community or technical colleges I'd never heard of in the wide expanse of greater Minnesota, or to campuses in the cities that were many times the size of my hometown. This was more people than I had ever been around that shared a common purpose. These people were student leaders, my peers who would become my mentors, my colleagues, my friends, and most of all, my family. I'd first heard of LeadMN a few weeks earlier, and I didn't know what this organization was. I would hardly have been able to give you a description of what my campus's student senate did. I wouldn't have been able to name the scope of possibilities in student leadership or imagine what students are capable of when we embrace our capacity for power and work together. I didn't have the clarity of vision to imagine that our possibilities were endless. Instead, I walked into the Student Leadership Summit with anxiety, fear, confusion, and a passion I didn't know how to give voice to. I wanted to do something. I wanted to be a part of something good. That was all I ever wanted, and I hoped this big, overwhelming conference I had wandered into might give my moral compass some sense of direction. Despite all my anxiety, I've always enjoyed public speaking, so I signed up for a short presenting slot available on the second evening of the conference. I wore a very plain gray three-piece suit. For everybody working in the LeadMN office with me now, it may seem hard to imagine, but 3 years ago, that was the only suit I had to bring to the conference. With it, I wore a navy blue tie, the first tie I'd ever owned, which my mom had picked out for me. I had 5 minutes of speaking to do, and my topic was how to turn grief into passion. And my audience was a sea of people I barely knew or didn't know at all. But I decided to let them know me. The first few sentences of speaking brought my awful reality into the conference. Only 3 months earlier, my mom had died. My life as I'd known it had died with her, and I had come to LeadMN afraid, lost, alone, and stubbornly searching for a purpose. Then the microphone, in one of those misfortunes of technology, cut out. Just as I thought I'd finally found some thread of a voice, I was frozen on stage with all those eyes on me, having just said something incredibly personal, and my words caught in my throat. But then I heard someone, Obala in fact, shout, "You've got this, Axel," followed by another voice and then another, and the whole room was pounding on tables and cheering me on and simply accepting me in a way I had never known before. In that moment, I felt myself become a part of this community, the incredible sense that my passion was just one of many rivers flowing into this great unifying sea of courage and change. So many of the adventures and friendships and times of personal growth I've known since have been connected in some way to LeadMN. And these 3 Octobers since have carried a deep nostalgia for me, knowing all roads lead back to that night in my plain gray suit, being accepted in a community for the first time, a community of hundreds, bound to serve 180,000 of our peers. From late nights at conferences to the halls of the state capitol to speaking to members of both chambers of Congress, experiences with LeadMN forged deep bonds for us and took us to advocate in the highest spheres of power. A few days ago, I was looking through pictures from my first Student Leadership Summit, and I caught myself tearing up. There were so many moments in those photos I still remember, and so many familiar faces, dozens and dozens, students who would go on to do amazing things in service to us all. People who would become dear, close friends, and many more I'd happily go grab a cup of coffee with, even after all this time. There are about 100,000 community and technical college students in the state now, and many once massive events are not so large as they used to be. I don't think I need to ask you to look around the room for you to know this is not a summit of hundreds. I probably don't need to tell any of you that the population of our community of students has dwindled because going to college has become more difficult than ever. The LeadMN you have come to does not have the numbers of the past. This conference is smaller than it ever was before. I think the day will come when this pandemic is over, where the crowd at these conferences is once again a sprawling sea. But numbers are not the only metric we can judge from, and numbers aren't what make us effective. Though our group is small today and over the next couple days, we have everything we need. We have everything we need because something brought you here. You don't need to tell me what it is, though I'd gladly listen. Maybe you've been sick of being stuck at home with nothing to do except online classes, and this was the first opportunity to come into your email inbox. Maybe it's been a lonely pandemic for you, and you're looking for a sense of community. This is a great place for it. Some of you might be ambitious, and maybe this seems like a good way to hone skills and experiences. It definitely is. Maybe you're afraid of the state of the world, of democracy, or of just how damn hard it is to stay in college these days. Maybe you're horrified at the despair so many of us wrestle with, the hunger and the homelessness. Maybe you're angry that the times we live in are so difficult, and yet your tuition is higher than ever. Maybe you wish, just for once, that the people in high places would listen to us. Maybe you just want to do something good. And maybe you have hope that together we can stand up to our troubles and change the world for the better. All of those moods have described me at various points in my LeadMN journey. And at LeadMN, we welcome you with any of those moods and whatever else you have to bring. Boredom, loneliness, ambition, fear or anger, wishes, dreams, and hopes. All of them are variations of the same feeling, passion, an emotion that moved you to sign up for this conference. With all of us here acting as a supportive, empathetic community, that deep emotion will move you to do so much more than you ever thought you could. Bring to this space what is on your mind and what is in your heart, because you are LeadMN now. You have it in you to become the champions of a bright future for students everywhere. If you know nothing else about this community for now, know that LeadMN represents the future. Students are struggling now more than ever. Tuition rises higher and higher, casting a shadow over our goals. Many of us have been left in deeper financial struggles over the past year, putting basic needs like food and housing into jeopardy. I think we all feel the awful exhaustion of the world as it currently is. And moreover, many of us know the crushing weight of mental health challenges. College should be a road we walk in pursuit of our dreams, but that road is riddled with inequity upon inequity. No student should know hunger or not have a safe roof over their head. No student should suffer their mental health struggles alone and without resources. No student should have to go into debt or give up basic needs or deal with the rending stress of figuring out how to afford school and scrape by just to have a shot at the life they want. LeadMN is a movement dedicated to tearing down those barriers and eradicating those challenges and building a better, kinder, and truly just higher education system in place of what we have now. Maybe that's a bold statement, but LeadMN is all about being bold. Student leadership is all about being bold. And students everywhere right now are in dire of bold leadership and bold change. So bring what you have today and all the rest of your days with LeadMN, and let's be bold together. We will succeed with that boldness by being passionate and true to ourselves and our cause, and to all those thousands of other students we must serve and fight for. Our passion will make the impossible possible. It will make the possible probable. And I promise you, the world will change because of our effort.